Well, it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, and his name is Dr. Ron Korn. He was born and raised in Denver. He obtained a PhD from the Albert Einstein College of Medicine at Yeshiva University in the Bronx. His advisor was a great biochemist, actually husband of the woman who discovered Taxol. Small world. He went to medical school, don't hold this against him, from for ASU people, at Stanford University. Please don't boo. His residency and fellowship was at the University of Pennsylvania. He moved to Scottsdale in '96, and he has been a pioneer in imaging research. Now, one other important thing everybody here knows, and many of the people we're caring for, he is so good of a radiologist that basically none of us make decisions without consulting Ron as to whether or not this tumor is smaller, bigger, whether it's changed texture, et cetera. So I'm sure the other radiologists don't like it, but we always say, what would Ron say? Dr. Ron Korn. What would Ron say?
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I would say I'm grateful, Dan. Thank you. And as I always say, you know, I always have to follow Dan in these lectures, and I can never do such a great job that he does. But what you see with Dan is absolutely what you get. And I have to tell a real quick story before you start my timer. For the gemabraxane study, and this is a true story, we were sitting in front of the FDA to get approval for the trial to begin, and it's called a SPA, a site-specific protocol. And basically, it's a contract between the company and the FDA that if you do exactly what the FDA says, and your results are positive, they'll approve the drug or the regimen. And they're in the middle of the meeting. Dan gets a phone call. There's about 8 FDA people, and he says, "Hold on, there's a patient." And the whole room stopped while Dan took care of that patient. So Dan, you're a great inspiration to all physicians and all people, and I thank you for that. Well, it's a real pleasure to be here, and what a magnificent gathering. And I love words, even though I sometimes trip over my own. And as I was looking for what the origin of the word gratitude is, because that's how I feel towards the Seena Magowitz Foundation for all their generous support, I came up with a new word called gratitudology. And I thought that was interesting, and then I thought that what all of you do is really, you practice gratitudology. And number 3, if you can see it on the screen, reads, "A philosophy for creating a magnificent way of life." And so I really appreciate what you do for patients who have pancreas cancer so that they can enjoy a magnificent life. So thank you. And so it's respect for what you do. We have a big mountain to climb. And I don't know if you can see, but there's a mattress here. This is, I think, a Sealy Posturepedic that was donated to allow those who climb the mountains to rest themselves. So we truly respect everything that you do. Well, I want to begin our journey actually back in the 1940s, even before that, with a guy by the name of Edwin Land. And Edwin Land was a remarkable guy. He was the son of Jewish immigrants who owned scrap metal yard in Connecticut. And he loved photography and the science of photography. And he was very into taking the little pieces of metal and creating all sorts of interesting cameras. And he went with his wife and his little girl to the Catskills. And there he listened to a comedian by the name of Jacob Cohen, who we know as Rodney Dangerfield. And he took a picture of his daughter and the wife at the table. And the daughter asked, from out of the mouth of babes, you could say, asked a very simple question. "Can I see that picture now?" And Edwin, that so took him back, that idea that he wanted to see the picture now, that he went out in the woods for 2 days and came back with the Polaroid. And the Polaroid had revolutionized our life and our thinking, because it was really the first time in America that we said, we want it done now. And so Edwin Land is really a pioneer in that area, and his daughter has to really be congratulated for asking the simple questions. And that journey continues with Dan, because Dan's a lot like Edwin's daughter, because he came down to me in 2006 in the reading room, which is a very dark place in radiology, and he had a question. He says, "I have a new drug. When can I know if it's working?" What he really wanted to know is, I need to know now, is it working? And I was very busy. I remember I was on the ER call, and I said, Dan, just get a PET scan and get it as soon as you can. And you know, he just left, and I thought, oh, thank God I can get back to work. Well, it turns out that he got a PET scan, and I don't know if you can see it. The one on your left says before treatment. All those black spots are cancer cells taking up radioactive glucose because they love energy. And within 1 month of treatment, the PET scan went cold. You don't see those black spots anymore. That was the first time that's ever happened in my career. And I called Dan and I said, Dan, which surgeon was brave enough to take out all of these tumors? And he says it wasn't. It was Dr. Abraxane. And it was that scan that we saw repeated over and over and over again in the clinical trial. And we said, we have a winner here. Not only do we have a winner here, but following up on we need to know now, we started a program. If you have a good idea, the best thing to do is start a program, right? So we started a program called the RADAR program, which stands for Rapid Detection and Assessment of Response, because we want to know as soon as possible whether your treatment is working, and the sooner the better. And this is a slide from Dan, and he quotes Fuller Albright, who says, young man, measure something. Now, when I trained in radiology, I was told a radiologist who uses a ruler is a dangerous radiologist. But Dan has really changed that paradigm because we really need to measure things precisely to know whether they're working. And how soon can we see something working? Well, let me give you an example over here, and it may be a little hard to see without a pointer. But this is a pancreas cancer that's in the middle, that black and white, on an MRI machine. It's the dark thing, and little red arrows are coming from that. This pancreas cancer is full of scar and surrounded by, pardon the expression, snot. It's making mucus. That's what hyaluronan is. That's what Dan was talking about. And a company has developed a drug, kind of like the Mucinex for pancreas cancer, that disrupts that mucin. And when that happens, what happens is that the cancer starts to receive a lot of blood flow. And that may sound terrible to you, but that's a good thing because more blood you have in a cancer, the more likely you can get your chemotherapy agent in there. And so as you see on all of those little different, and I wish I could show you more, there's a little bit of color in the center of each of those little different panels, and that's blood returning. And within 8 hours of this treatment, we were seeing blood returning. That's as early as we can see a response. That's incredible because the impact of being on the wrong treatment is a huge economic impact. If you're on the wrong drug and you stay on that drug where other treatments that aren't working for a year, it costs the healthcare system $250,000 just to keep you on the wrong drug. But if you're on the right drug, it's $35,000. So imagine the money being saved when we know if the right drug is working. But it's more important than money. It's time and hope. We need to know as soon as we can if your drug is working, if your treatment is working, and imaging is one of the best ways of doing that. Well, we all want to cure pancreas cancer, and the only way to cure pancreas cancer is to give you the best treatment. And an old professor of mine said the best treatment for cancer is formaldehyde, which means you got to have the surgeon go in and take it out and put it in formaldehyde. And in order for us to get the surgeons to take the cancer out as soon as possible, we need to have a detection system, a mammogram for the pancreas, if you will. And this chart here, if you can see it, is the impact of mammography, the impact that mammography had in breast cancer. Before 1987, the mortality rate for breast cancer was climbing exponentially until we introduced mammography in this country, and you could see the dramatic change in survival. In fact, I don't care what the government says or what government agencies say, mammograms save lives. So too will pancreas mammograms save lives as well. Now the good news is everybody's working on an early detection of pancreas cancer. And this young man is amazing. He's 15 years old. You probably heard of him. His name is Jack Andraka. And he took a very simple strip of nanotubes, some high-tech technology that only teenagers know. And he was able to put a drop of blood from somebody with pancreas cancer, and if the strip swelled, they had pancreas cancer. And he's come up with an interesting way of early detection of pancreas cancer. Now, the way that Jack is connected to you is that without your hard work and without the awareness of pancreas cancer, Jack would have never chosen this project, I guarantee you. So you really need to give yourself a round of applause for who you're touching throughout the world in pancreas cancer. And what's remarkable is that there's a ways to go with this, but everybody's developing a blood test for pancreas cancer. That's fantastic. There's blood, there's saliva, there's urine, there's something called the microbiome, which is the bacteria that lives in your mouth. That's changed in patients who have early pancreas cancer. I think it's a noble goal, and it's one that's needed. But the problem is once your blood test is positive, you got to find it. And there are a lot of causes of an elevated marker, tumor marker, where there's no cancer that exists. We call those false positives. And the false positive rate of a lot of these blood tests or urine tests are tremendous. So we really need to first screen the right people who are at risk for pancreas cancer and then begin to find out where it is. And this is where the mammogram is needed. So when Dan came back and announced, we need a mammogram for the pancreas, I went back to my team and I said, I need ideas for a new mammogram that'll detect pancreas early. And this is no lie. We have a lot of women, great women scientists in our facility, and this is what they sent me back, if you could see it, the mammogram. And I said, no, that's not quite what I wanted. I wanted, some of you know, right? I said, what I really want is a way to detect pancreas cancer early with the use of imaging. And so we came up with 3 ideas, and there are many out there, but we really wanted to focus on 3 of these. The first is we really wanted to detect on the surface of the pancreas cancer cell itself or in the pancreas cancer cell itself whether it is going to be producing proteins or other substances that we can detect using immunology or using antibodies. Because antibodies can fight off the smallest foreign substance known to man, real tiny things in real low amounts, and if we can co-opt them and image antibodies binding to pancreas cancer cells, we could really detect it earlier. And that's called immunopet, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. When pancreas cancer affects the pancreas, the normal architecture of the pancreas changes. The texture changes, if you will. You can imagine a beautifully well-designed organ that starts to change its complexity and morphology. And so we have a wonderful platform that I think we're one of the few in the world to have called textural analysis that can look at the change in texture of the pancreas. And we think that might be a great step in detecting pancreas cancer on scans. And the third thing that's very interesting is that the internal machinery of pancreas cancer cells is really out of whack. It's using strange forms of energy that are unheard of for normal cells. It's all malfunctioning. These pancreas cancers are what we call primitive eaters. And so we're going to use special probes that look for primitive eaters in our body and thus early detection of pancreas cancer. So here's one approach that I mentioned with antibodies. Antibodies are these little Y-shaped proteins. They look like little slingshots. And we can label them with radioactivity. And the antibodies can bind to specific parts of the cancer cell and not bind to either normal cells or inflammation of the pancreas, which sometimes can confound early diagnosis. And so if we can inject these, and we are going to start a trial in the next quarter or two, where we take these specific radio-labeled antibodies, injected in people who have early-stage pancreas cancer as a first step for the mammogram, to see if we can detect pancreas cancer. And here's an example of an immunopet detecting the smallest dot of pancreas cancer. That little yellow thing with the arrow pointing to it is a tiny pancreas cancer that you can't see any other way but with this PET scan, this immunopet. Now, the color is the PET scan, the black and white is the CT scan. And because we are data hoarders, like hoarding on TV, we hoard every ounce of data we can get. We want to look at the CT part of this with our textural analysis to see if we can measure the texture. And this may be hard to see, but on your right, you will see a normal pancreas with the yellow line, and I hope you can see it, you may not. But that little black squiggly line shows the normal texture of the pancreas. On your left, look at how different that texture is in somebody who has early pancreas cancer. It is completely different. That line going way down is exactly where the pancreas cancer is and where we need to tell the surgeon to go. And believe me, as a radiologist, it's fun to tell surgeons where to go. That's remarkable technology that we're going to use. And the last thing I want to leave you with for how we're going to make this pancreagram, or this mammogram of the pancreas, is remember, ruffles have ridges. When pancreas cancer grows, it needs energy, and it'll eat anything, including your own body's proteins, albumin, egg whites, if you will. And it grows by creating these ruffles, these little tentacles, as you see, sticking up. And these ruffles just grab everything they can in sight to eat them. They're hungry. That shouldn't happen in normal cells. And so if we can label albumin with radioactivity, then we can image where the cancer is through this process called macropinocytosis. And we're starting to do animal experiments to see if this special labeled albumin will work in detecting early pancreas cancer. So ruffles have ridges is a great thing to remember. Well, we have a ways to go, and this cartoon tells me that we're going to kiss a lot of frogs, and it says, before I disrobe, there's something I should tell you. It's green, it's tiny, and it's covered with warts. There, I said it. That's what our goal, we're going to run into some obstacles, but we think we're going to get over them. Because cancer doesn't sleep, and neither should we. For all the Steves of the world, we don't want to sleep until you're cured. Because early detection of pancreas cancer leads to cure. Early response of pancreas cancer leads to better quality of life and outcome. And your contribution has really made a tremendous difference in the lives of the patients of pancreas cancer and their families. Once pancreas cancer is cured, and we believe it will be, then we can sleep. And so we are grateful for your generous support. And we thank you for providing us all with a good night's sleep. And Dan, I'll see you first thing Monday morning at work. Thank you.